Lisa the Painful is a 2D screen-scroller RPG game released by Dingaling Productions in December 2014. The game takes place in a post-apocalyptic world after a catastrophic event occurs, which is alluded to as the Flash throughout the game. The game begins by introducing Brad, a kind, caring martial arts instructor who stood up for his friends as a child and suffered harsh abuse from his father. Brad finds a baby girl in the middle of the desert area. We learn of the magnitude of his discovery when we learn that the world that Brad lives in seemingly no longer has a single living woman. Brad names this girl Buddy and vows to protect her from the terrors of the world that would approach her if her existence were realized. The main plot of the game begins when Brad comes home one day to find his home ransacked, his friends dead, and Buddy kidnapped. The story that the player embarks upon is the tale of Brad's journey to retrieve Buddy and return her to safety. I won't be able to explain the whole plot in this video, but I will explain bits and pieces as I get into themes, strategies, and gameplay experience that I thought made Lisa the Painful culminate into probably the best single-player story game that I've ever played.
The game's controls are pretty simple. You walk left or right, you press a button to interact, you climb ropes by pressing upwards, and you have a button to jump. Such a simple set of rules to the game makes it easy for the story to progress in a single direction, but also allows for ample exploration. If paths are not supposed to be accessed, they are simply blocked by guards, or a bridge isn't built yet, or there's a cliff in the way that you can't jump over without a bike. There are 3 different areas in the game for the player to explore, along with a few transition areas where major plot events occur. Each of these areas has many paths to explore, not all of which are even necessary. I often found myself split between which way to go, and I ended up deciding to clear the doors in sequential order as I went along as to not miss anything. Sometimes it seemed tedious, but most of the time it was worth finding a new member for my gang, a hidden Easter egg, or even a power-up.
Nice. We climbed all the way up here just to see this.
These controls and gameplay structure leads to quite a sequential path. It allows for effective storytelling as the player has no choice but to move forward. This gameplay structure also allows for forced interaction and the illusion of choice. At some points, if the player doesn't agree with Brad's actions, which became the case for me later into the game, the player must continue on with them. There are also some paths you must take, even though you know you will be ambushed down the path.
Oh, they're gonna ambush me outside. 100%.
Yeah, there you go.
This leads me into the first strategy that the developers of Lisa heavily employed, which I'd like to talk about: Feudal Interactivity. Feudal Interactivity is a term coined by Nick Fortuno, a writer and game designer, used to describe any situation in a game where, no matter the action of the player, the outcome is inevitable, though the outcome might not be what the player thinks is correct or even moral. This strategy can force tragedy in the story of a game, even though the player might be putting all efforts into preventing such a tragedy. Lisa employs feudal interactivity in a way that enhances the storytelling like no other game that I've ever played. You'll walk into a cave and next thing you know, you'll have to give up a gang member or all of your belongings. You don't even know why this mysterious, evil-looking person is doing this to you. There's even a point at which you're given the option to ask him why he's doing this, and I elected to ask him, and he ended up taking all of my belongings and my arm. There is so much feudal interactivity in this game. While you're walking down a seemingly harmless path, you are attacked by a gang or a monster. If you go to sleep to heal your party, there's a chance that one of your party members are kidnapped, or some of your belongings are taken, or all of your party members are badly poisoned. There are ways to combat this random adversity. This game allows you to save whenever you'd like, and allows you to die by jumping off any cliff in the game. In my playthrough, there came multiple points at which my party was extremely low on HP, and I had no choice but to sleep by a campfire. In one of these occurrences, when I slept, I lost Jack, one of my favorite party members, so I just jumped off a cliff to gain him back. This sort of manipulation of randomness defeats part of the purpose Dingaling was going for when designing Lisa, and it's looked down upon by the community. These random events exist to reinforce the brutality of the world in this game. The idea that you can't become too attached to what you have, because at any given moment, it could all be lost. Sort of like how Brad comes home to a ransacked house, missing Buddy at the beginning of the game. Lisa the Painful is loaded with themes that complement one another in odd ways that I personally have not seen done. Although I don't commonly play single-player RPG story-based games, I don't think that I would be the only one surprised by the expansive range of emotions that I experienced while progressing through this game. There were moments in which I was jump scared as I was being jumped by a gang or as a snowman popped a gun into his hand and shot me. There were many moments in which shivers were sent down my spine, like the moment that I learned that something which I thought was a tree root while exploring a cave was actually the twisted neck of a human turned joy monster. To my surprise, there were countless moments where I was nearly crying laughing, like the time that I thought I was stranded on an island, only to find out that I could ride a corpse like a boat, with the same tropic-like music playing as when I rode the actual boat.
I thought I thought the game was over and I'm just trapped on the island. But I can use Tardy as a boat.
The fact that this occurred at one of the climaxes of the game's plot only added to my laughter. Speaking of music, this game's music and soundtrack in general is excellent. At one moment, you'll be walking through a seemingly boring desert area, but as soon as you walk into a new area, a new track that you haven't heard before starts playing, and this sets the tone for your entire exploration. The music ranges from deserted and dry to simplistic and catchy to sad and eerie, and sometimes it cuts out perfectly to emphasize serious plot points or interactions in the game.
Wow, that was underwhelming.
It's like the Moondogs. The dice just
No.
The violent, apocalyptic environment in which the game takes place, combined with the very limited knowledge that the player has of the world that they're exploring, allows for many gruesome and chilling scenarios, especially in the main storyline. Despite this, Lisa never ceases to employ consistent, effective comedic relief along the way. In my opinion, this juxtaposition between consistent, self-aware comedic effect and the grim world in which the game takes place in is one of the main reasons that this game has gotten so much attention in many different circles of gaming over the years.
Get into that fucking water.
That was my gasoline.
Oh man, I should have told you.
It wouldn't let me go forward.
I remember watching Donkey's Lisa video a few years back and laughing my ass off. It really made me interested in watching more of this game. I look back on Donkey's 10-minute video now and I realized that he exploited the best of Lisa's dark humor because this is what really draws people into the game. Not to mention that this type of self-aware comedy suits Donkey's character perfectly. The humor employed in Lisa the Painful is definitely not commonplace nor done effectively in many modern games. As mentioned before, Lisa captures a number of dark, difficult topics, approaching them all from the perspective of Brad. The player is Brad for the entirety of the game, initially following the rhetoric that what Brad is doing is correct. From the player's initial perspective, Brad is a concerned parent trying to protect his child. As the player progresses further throughout the game, they learn a bit more about the world Brad lives in and the severity of the situation at hand. Buddy is the last female in a doomed world. She is the world's last hope in the eyes of most of the world besides Brad. Despite this fact and Buddy's own will, Brad will stop at nothing to protect Buddy. Throughout the game, the gruesome, ruthless nature of this kill or be killed world is made apparent to the player, which reinforces the idea that Brad's protective nature is somewhat justified. We learn throughout the game that Brad's actions are also reinforced by the abuse that he and his sister faced from his father. In his backstory, Brad eventually ran away from his home, sort of abandoning his sister, who later ended up taking her own life. This emotional trauma fuels Brad's seemingly endless resolve to protect Buddy and also fuels his addiction to a mysterious drug called joy, which can eventually transform people into monsters. Brad gives everything on his path of destruction to get Buddy back. The player can empathize with Brad or agree with Brad's friends who have taken it upon themselves to try to save the world. It really is a gray area in which both sides have proper reason to pursue their goal. One thing is for sure, Brad becomes more and more of a monster throughout this game. He kills and kills and kills. I couldn't help but want to stop and let Brad die, but you are forced to continue Brad's murderous rampage. This monstrous theme reaches completion at the very end of the game when Brad literally turns into a joy mutant.
Oh. Okay. Can I move? Oh my god, I can move.
I'd also like to mention that some of the areas I had to walk through playing this game straight up gave me shivers. The gruesome and creepy imagery that this world allows for, specifically with the joy mutants scattered around throughout the game, combined with the grim, cruel nature of the plotline, allows for some chilling experiences. Even the fighting system complements these themes. At one moment, monsters just cough up blood or cry, causing you to feel some sort of pity for them, while at other moments they will strike for the entirety of a party member's HP bar unexpectedly.
This environment, combined with scattered jump scares, keeps your adrenaline pumping at all times.
I know I didn't cover everything in this video, but to wrap things up, Lisa the Painful is such a successful game in its category because it dives into such difficult topics head first through game structure that allows for excellent storytelling, effective dialogue, gruesome imagery, rewarding world exploration, and comedic relief.
Thanks for listening to my input. I hope you enjoyed.